In this advanced modeling video, we're going to design and create this hobbit house. This is a more advanced tutorial and is going to assume that you have a strong basic knowledge of SketchUp and all of the popular tools. I will narrate each tool as I use it and will model along in real time. For a reference of each tool that I've used and a link to further help on those tools, see the document that goes along with this tutorial. Alright, so let's jump right in. First thing you should do before starting any model is save it somewhere. Once you save it, SketchUp will automatically save it about every 5 minutes. SketchUp always starts with a person standing there, and that is for scale and size reference. Since we're not modeling for humans, but in fact for hobbits, I'm going to go to 3D Warehouse and search for Frodo and find a scale Frodo model. So here we go. You can see Frodo, a small hobbit, standing next to a human. Great for a scale reference as we model this hobbit house. I'm going to start modeling the front of my hobbit house by using the line tool. I'm going to make a 20-foot line along the ground like this by stretching it out and then just typing in 20 feet and pressing enter. And then I'm going to find the 2-point arc tool, which is this one here. And I'm going to click at the beginning of my line and the end of my line. And I'm going to start moving it around, and I want to get that arc standing straight up. So sometimes this can take a little bit of moving around like you see here. If I move it all the way up, it'll kind of click at one point here and say half circle. So I want this arc to be a half circle. Now I'm going to take the push-pull tool and click and hold until I get my extrusion back as far as I want, and then release. So very quickly here, we've got the beginnings of a hobbit house. Now let's add that signature front door. So if we go over to this button here, we can find the circle tool. And if I hovered over that first line that I drew, it'll snap at the middle. And once I get that snap, I can move straight up and click and start drawing a circle like this. When I click again, that circle is set in place. I'm going to get the offset tool from the same menu that push-pull is in and hover it over that circle that I just drew, click and release, and then click again. And that's going to make an extra ring that we can use for our trim that's going to go around our door. So let's orbit around here, and we'll go back into these menus and find the push-pull tool. And if you don't have that ring face selected, you can just hit spacebar and select it. Then we can take our push-pull tool, click and release, and then click again to make the door trim. Next, we're going to work on those two windows that go to the left and the right of the door. I'm going to start with the tape measure tool and click on the straight bottom line here. And when you do that, you get these construction lines. They're kind of like dotted temporary lines. They're good for using as like a template to draw against. And then I'm going to go back and get that 2-point arc tool we used in the beginning and just draw sort of an arbitrary arc between these 2 points. And then another one like this. And I'm kind of eyeballing it here because I want these windows to be sort of unique looking. So I've got these 2 lines here, and I can actually go down here to the move tool and adjust them if I hover over the points and click and drag. So I can move these arcs around and get them to exactly the shape that I want. Now I'm going to use the erase tool here and just erase these temporary lines because I don't need them anymore. Next, I'm going to go get the line tool and just put a line across the bottom of these 2 arcs, and now I've got a separate face here that works the same way as any other face in SketchUp, but like that door that we just drew. I'll go find that offset tool that we used earlier. I'm going to make an offset to make some window trim here. Now I don't really like the way this looks. The trim on the top is getting a little bit close to the door, so I'm just going to hit Control Z to undo. I'm actually going to go back and take my move tool and make a little adjustment here, and then do the offset tool again. So as you're modeling along, don't be afraid to step back a couple steps and redo something that you did to get it right, like you see here. Now I'm going to zoom in a bit and double click on this trim, and you'll see that when I do that, it highlights and selects that trim. I'm going to go to my move tool and I'm going to start moving it to the right. But as I move it, I'm going to tap Control or Alt, and you'll see that tooltip on the bottom of the screen, and it will tell you the key that matches the type of computer that you are using. And when you do that, it makes a copy of the thing that you are moving. And what I want to do here is use this copy of the window I made and create a mirror image of it for the other side of my door. And with it still selected like you see here, I can right click on it and click flip along and click red direction. And that's going to flip it along the red line, which you actually see along the bottom of the screen here. Now it may not always be obvious which direction is the right direction, and if you're like me, you can just try it, and if it doesn't work, undo it, and try the green or the blue to get it to flip the way that you want. So I'm going to move this window back in place using the move tool. And as you can see, when I moved it, a face disappeared, and that's okay. When you have this happen, which it does happen occasionally, you can find the line tool and just redraw any line, and that will heal the face like you've seen here. Now I'm going to go find the push-pull tool up here, and I'm going to push in these windows a little bit, give them a 3D effect, and pull out this trim that's around these windows to give it the same sort of effect that we have around the door. Now our Hobbit house needs a front step, so I'm going to go find the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle on the front here, kind of create a separate face, and then use the push-pull tool and pull it out to make a nice front step like this. Next, we're going to start adding some materials to our model. If you click on the paint bucket tool in the left side toolbar, that's going to slide open this materials menu on the right. And I'm actually looking for a wood texture that's going to go nicely on our front door. Now when you go into the search box here, you're going to see all the categories of textures. There is a wood category, but there also are some wood paneling that I like in the bricks, cladding, and siding section. So I'm going to pick one of those. Click on the texture that you like, and then click on your door to paint it in place. Now let's go back over to our materials library and add some more texture here. So let's go find some colors, and we'll color up the trim around the door. So I'm going to pick this nice yellow color. And with painting in SketchUp or adding materials, you can do it to each face. So you can see here that I'm adding to the front of the trim and the sides and so on. I'm going to pick a different color here for my window trim. And I'll just carefully go around and get all of the different sides. You don't have to do every side like I'm doing here, but if you will be looking at your model from a bunch of different angles, you may want to carefully make sure that you texture each and every side of objects like I am doing here. And it's simply a matter of just clicking on each face, and if you mess up, you can always hit undo. So there we go. We've got some color on our trim, looking pretty good. Some materials in SketchUp are translucent or transparent, and you can see that in the glass and mirrors selection. So if I find one of these here and paint it on the windows, as you orbit around, it'll actually let you look inside your Hobbit house. Now I'm going to go back into our materials library and paint some brick on the front of our house. So I can look through the categories here and find the brick and cladding, and use these old bricks. I'm going to paint it on the front of our house. Now you may remember that there's some field stones in the front of our house. So how do we separate this face so that the field stones are at the bottom and the bricks are at the top? To make that happen, we're going to have to separate this face. So I'm going to use the freehand tool and actually draw in the field stones so that we can put a different texture on there. So what I'll do is start from one side and just scribble my way across the front of the Hobbit house like this, making sure that I connect it on the other side. And you can see here it's still one face because it's not divided on the other side. So I'll select the freehand tool again, kind of scribble along like this to make some field stones, making sure I touch the edge. And now you can see the bottom and the top face are separate. Now I can go get a fieldstone texture and apply it to the bottom, and I can get that separation between the fieldstones and the bricks. I'll add some fieldstones to our front porch, and now the front of our Hobbit house is looking pretty good. So let's add a little color to our roof, and I'm going to go in here and add some grass to the roof of our Hobbit house. I'm going to look under landscaping and vegetation and find one of these nice grassy textures and apply it to this curved surface that makes up the roof of our Hobbit house. Now making something look realistic is more than just textures. We're going to have to decorate this Hobbit house with some plants. So I'll turn to 3D Warehouse and search for plants. I'm going to find and click on this nice looking plant here, and I'm going to get this warning that says you've selected a pretty big model. Downloading this may slow down SketchUp. So what does this mean? Well, plants are really detailed objects, lots of little branches and leaves, and all of that tiny geometry can actually slow down SketchUp if you put too many plants in your model. So for plants, the best thing to do is to find and search for 2D plants, which will be way faster and in many cases look a lot better than the 3D plants in SketchUp. So let's start by selecting some of these 2D plants and placing them in front of our Hobbit house. So I'll bring this one in here, and let's go through and find a couple more, maybe this one. And what I like to do when I bring in plants and objects from 3D Warehouse, oftentimes I will just download a few of them like this. and just take a look and see what they look like. You can always just erase them later if you don't like them. But so far, these first couple ones I do like, so I'm going to place these in front of my Hobbit house like you see here. There is a lot of content on 3D Warehouse, millions and millions of models. So what I suggest is be as specific as you can in your search and download a few models and just check them out and make sure they are what you want, just like I'm doing here. And now we're going to take the models that we've collected and move them into position and size them a little bit better for our house. To resize objects that you brought in from 3D Warehouse, just select them and find the scale tool in the left side toolbar. And you can use these scale grips and you can scale things up and down. You can take your move tool and move them into place like you see here. Now I've got this plant a little bit better sized for the front of our house. Do the same thing here. Just click on the scale tool and grab some of these scale grips. You can really easily scale up and scale things down. Move this thing in place and set it here. I can also use the move tool to make copies of things like this tree. As you're moving an object that you want copied, just look for the shortcut key along the bottom of your screen. It will leave the original copy and make a new copy on your mouse cursor that you can place anywhere you want. Great for copying trees around like I'm doing here. And you can go back and you can scale the copies you've made so not all of your trees look identical, to give things some randomness. To give these trees even more randomness, you can hover over the top of them and click on the red plus marks, and that will allow you to spin them around. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the landscaping here by putting some trees in the background. Now I've decided I really don't like this tree in the front, so I'm just going to take the erase tool and click on it to erase it. And then I'll select this tree, click the move tool, and then toggle the copy as I'm moving to kind of leave one tree over here, put another one over here. And I'm going to scale this one up and make it a little bit bigger. Maybe I'll go back and kind of move it in place like this and get it exactly where I want. And now this is starting to look like what I want here. I may go back and adjust this one. And now, just for good measure, let's take our move tool and put Frodo up on our front steps. Now you may remember in the beginning I had an image as a background that really added to the realism of this model. And to make that, I just made a simple three-sided facade to go in the back. So I'll make 3 lines here with the line tool, and then kind of orbit up, and I'll make a vertical line going along the blue axis, which I can tell because it'll snap to the blue axis. If I click and then start a line over here going up in the blue, SketchUp will kind of snap to that previously drawn line, and when I finish out the rectangle, it'll make a face. So you can kind of keep going like this, and as you draw these lines, you can sort of touch where you want them to go, and SketchUp will help you figure it out, so you can easily make a face like this. To make the last part of the facade, I'll just go up and touch in this corner, and then keep moving over, and you'll kind of see the line snap in the blue. And then I can complete it and make this 3-sided facade like you see here. So now we need to use an image as a background. We're going to go to the hamburger menu and hit Insert, and we're going to find a file from our computer. And it just so happens we actually have an image from Hobbitown in New Zealand. So we're going to open up this image and we're going to use it as a material. And that's going to bring it in on the paint bucket tool, and we're actually going to stick it on the middle section of this facade. And it doesn't really matter where. I'm going to put it here in the lower left-hand corner. You want to scale it up so it's at some kind of a reasonable height like we see here. Now with that texture in place, I'm going to right-click on it and select the texture menu and select position. And this is going to let us move this texture around and adjust its size and shape. And what I want to do is get this texture large enough that it will cover all 3 of these pieces of this facade. So I'm going to move the bottom left-hand corner down here, and I'm going to click and drag on this green pin and make it a little larger, kind of slide it into place. So what you can ultimately see here is that one tile of this image is larger than all 3 sides of the facade that I just drew, and that's key for this to work. So once I've got that set, I'll right click and click done, and then I can go back to the paint bucket tool and select the eyedropper, and I can click on this middle image and then click on the left and click on the right. And you see what it'll do is it will make that image span across all 3 of the panels in this facade. It's actually a pretty neat effect, and it will look better towards the end of this modeling session. If you want to get rid of the lines on each panel, you can hit the erase tool and hold down shift, and if you click on each of those lines, it won't erase them, but it'll just hide them, so you get a much smoother image like you see here. Now I'm going to create some vegetation on the ground, and to do that I'm going to go back to that 3-point arc tool that we used before. That's this tool here, and I'm just going to click over here and click over here and bring a giant arc out that kind of covers underneath our hobbit house and a little extra. That's going to make a nice face on the ground surface like this. I can go over to the paint bucket tool or even the eyedropper and sample that vegetation off of my roof and paint it on the ground so that it all matches. So now you can really see how everything is tying together here and making a really nice 3D effect in this model. Next, we're going to add some of our own scenes to this model. And to do that, click on the clapperboard on the right side, and that's going to open up the views dialog, which you may have to scroll down to. And here you see the standard views, top, left, right, side, isometric, etc. But we're going to add our own by clicking the plus button. When you do that, that just records where you're currently looking at the model. So if you move away and you click on that scene again, it will bring you back to that place. And using this, we can actually record multiple different scenes in our model to help tell a story. So here I'm going to record this scene as well by hitting the plus button, and now I can transition between these two scenes nice and smoothly. You can even rename the scenes too if you'd like. Once you have those multiple scenes set up, you can transition back and forth between them very smoothly like you see here. If you have the ability to video record your screen, you can export that animation for use in a video editing program or some other use. In this next lesson, we're going to model the Tower of Mordor. And here's what the final result will look like. A dark demonic tower with the Eye of Sauron with a dark sky as a backdrop. So let's jump right in. I'm going to start with modeling the base that is going to turn into our mountain that our tower will eventually stick out. And to do that, I'm going to draw a big old rectangle on the ground like this. When you draw a rectangle like this, if you decide you want to change the size later, you can use the move tool and you can actually move parts of the rectangle like I'm doing here. Now I'm going to take the pencil tool and I'm just going to draw a bunch of random crossing lines because I want this mountain to be kind of craggy and rocky and sort of random. When you're doing this, just make sure the lines connect on both sides. You can put them at random, but make sure they start at a line and end on a line, just like you see here. I'm going to do a light amount of lines, about this much. And then I'm going to double click on this middle face here and take the move tool. And with that face selected, I'm going to click and release on that. And I'm going to start moving it upwards on the blue axis. If you're having trouble staying on the blue axis like this, you can tap the up or the down arrow in SketchUp and it will lock it on the blue axis for you. This is looking pretty good so far, but I do want to make a few tweaks to it. And to do that, you can select individual lines or parts of the mountain, and you can take the move tool and you can kind of stretch and tweak these the way that you want. Using the arrow tools will help you. What you can do is you can click on a line or an intersection and start moving it and tap the left, right, or up arrow, and it will lock it in a particular direction. So it'll make it a lot easier to make little tweaks to this thing. Now that I've got this to the general shape that I want, I'm going to triple click to select the entire thing, and then I'm going to go over to the eyeglasses on the right. And I'm going to check off smooth edges and soften coplanar and run this angle slider all the way up to the top. And when I click off of the mountain, you'll see that it actually smooths it out quite a bit. Now I'm going to go back and triple click to select the whole thing again. I'm going to right click on it and make it a group. And we'll talk more about groups in a little bit and why these are important. So let's switch gears and start modeling up our tower. I'm going to move over to the side here and draw our tower over here. I'm going to start by using the circle tool. So I'm just going to draw a big circle on the ground like this. And then I'm going to go get our push-pull tool and pull it up like this, make it kind of a tall tower. And then I'm going to triple click to select it and right click it and make it a group. Groups are a really important aspect of modeling in SketchUp, and they can help you keep things organized and clean. In this example here, I'm going to show you how that works. Now what I'm going to do over here is just draw a basic box, nothing special. So we'll make the first one here, and then I'm just going to copy it and make a duplicate of it right over here. Now if I take the second box and I put it on top of the first box, and then I move the box away, they stick together. And this isn't what we want. So to avoid this, I'm going to take the first box and make it a group. I'm going to take the second box and make it a group, which is effectively putting a little force field around these boxes. Now, when I stick them together, they don't stick to each other. And because both my terrain and my tower are groups, I can join them together like this and they won't stick to each other, which is key to having a clean and easy to work with model. To make an edit to a group, you have to double click on it before you can do things like push-pull, like I'm doing here. So keep that in mind as you're modeling along. In the next step here, I'm going to create a circular array in SketchUp, and I'm going to do it kind of quickly, so I think it's worth just taking a quick break here and breaking down what an array is in SketchUp and how you create it. There are two kinds of arrays that you can make. You can make an array of parts that's just a bunch of copies of parts in a straight line in SketchUp, or you can make them as a circle. So first let's start with the straight line. So I'm going to select this cube here that I've created, and I'm going to go over to the left side toolbar here and find the Move tool. Now you've used this before, so with something selected, if I click on it or click near it, and I start moving, I can move it away, and if I click again, that's where this object will end up. Now, if you look on the bottom strip, the very bottom strip of this screen in SketchUp, on my screen here, it says Option equals Copy. Okay, now if you're on a Mac or a Chromebook or some different kind of computer, it might have a different key listed, like the Alt or Control key. In my case, it is the Option key. So if I tap Option, it's going to leave the original copy behind and let me click to place a new copy. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click here. And if you look in the bottom right-hand corner of SketchUp, this is called the Measurement Control Box, or VCB. And you'll see that the distance that I moved this cube is 3 feet, 6 5/8 inches, okay? Now, if I don't do anything else, and I can just type in star, that means multiply, and you'll see the star appears in that distance box. And in this case, I'm going to type in 5. I'm going to press enter. Note that I didn't move my mouse over to that box and click in it. You can just start typing and it will automatically put this in there. So again, I typed *5 and I'm going to press enter or return. And so it's going to do the thing that I just did, which is move that box 5 more times. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 copies of the thing that I did. So essentially it did it 5 total times. This is a linear array, and this is how you create one in SketchUp. So let's do the same thing, but this time let's make a circular array. So I'm going to select this cube. I'm going to go here and find the rotate tool, and I'm just going to click in an arbitrary position out here. And the rotate tool works like this. So with this cube selected, I click in some position out here, click again, and then I can rotate something about this point. But again, if we look in the bottom of the screen, it says Option equals Copy. So just like the Move tool, if I tap Option, it's going to leave the original behind and let me create a new copy. So I'm going to set this new copy here, and just like I did with the Move tool, I'm going to do *5 and press enter, and it's going to do that thing 5 more times. Now, in the step that you're going to see, I want the copies to go completely around something, so if you don't click anything else, you can keep typing in new numbers. So I'm going to do *12 and press enter, *14, *16, *17. And it looks like 17 is going to do what I want. That's going to get this thing around in a complete circle. So you can keep typing in numbers until you get what you want. And that is what we're going to do on the steps to follow. Now let's add a little more detail to this model. I'm going to take the circle tool and I'm going to draw a circle just like this on the edge of our tower, and take our push-pull tool and pull it down like this. Then I'm going to triple click on it, and instead of making a group this time, I'm going to make it a component, which is similar to a group but a little different. You'll see why in a moment here. I'm going to give this component a name. You don't have to worry about these other settings here. I'm just going to press OK. So it appears like it's a group. I'm going to now find the rotate tool, and that's the thing that lets you spin things around in SketchUp. With this new sort of spire selected, I'm going to start rotating it like this. Then I'm going to tap the Option key, or it may be Control or Alt if you're on a different computer, and I'm going to make a copy of it. So this works a lot like the Move tool. Now in the bottom right hand corner, I'm going to start typing a number. So I'm saying star 12, star 8, star 9, and that's the amount of copies of this tube that are going to be made around in a circle. This is actually sometimes referred to as a circular array. But whatever it's called, it lets us take these tubes and copy them around our tower like this, which is pretty neat. Now, you remember what I said a moment ago about components being different? This is what makes them different than groups. Whatever I do to one component happens to every other copy of the component in the model. So in this case here, where I want to continue editing these spires that stick off the tower, it makes it so I only have to edit one and they all change. So here I'm going to use the scale tool and just kind of tweak these things a little bit. I'm going to make this top section a little bit smaller so they get kind of pointy like this. I'm going to take a circle and add something that kind of sticks up off the top here. And no matter what change you do to a component, again, it'll happen to all components. So here I can kind of offset something and then take my push-pull tool and sort of pull up. So this can make modeling really fun, really efficient. And again, instead of having to do this 12 times, I only have to do it once. So really, really effective way to model. So components are a great way to make repeating things in your model. So let's start modeling that eye that's on the top of the tower. So I'm going to take the 3-point arc tool, and I'm going to make an arc in the ground like this. And what I want to do is make this arc, I want to tweak it a little bit, which is something you can't do with the arc tool by itself. So I'm going to make the arc and select it. Then I'm going to go to the scale tool, and I'm going to grab this scale grip and kind of scale this arc down so it has the look of the one we see in the pictures. Then I'm going to take the 3-point arc tool again and make another arc between these top 2 points and bring it down like this. I'm going to hit spacebar and then click on the arc and go back to the scale tool again and stretch this one down. So you can see this is using the scale tool is a really effective way to kind of stretch and bend geometry really easily in SketchUp. But I'm not done yet. I want to add a 3D effect to this, so I'm going to select that top arc and I'm going to go get the rotate tool. I'm going to click and hold on this top point and then pull my mouse pointer over to the other point like this. So the rotational part turns red. Then I'm going to click off the top here and release and start moving my mouse pointer up like this, and it's going to swing that arc down and stretch the face into a 3D shape like this. So another really cool way you can sort of stretch and bend geometry in SketchUp. Now to make the eye that's in there, I'm going to get the circle tool and I'm going to use the inferencing to sort of snap to the top of this arc. So I'm going to kind of touch the bottom, hold down my shift key, and then go over to the top there, and it's going to help me snap the circle right in the middle. So I'll create my circle like this. Now you may have noticed there's not an ellipse tool in SketchUp, and that's because to make an ellipse, you use the scale tool. So just like we scaled that arc, we're going to select the circle that we just made and get the scale tool and kind of squish this circle down to make it an ellipse like this. Pretty easy to do with the scale tool. Now we're going to go back and make the iris, and so we're going to get the circle tool, and it'll kind of snap in the middle like this, and we'll make a circle. This iris is also an ellipse, so again we'll double click to select the circle, use the scale tool. I like to hold down shift when I use the scale tool to make it a uniform scaling, so we can get that iris just like this. So pretty simple when combining the circle and the scale tool. Now I'm going to click and drag and select all of this, and then right click and make it a group. And that's going to put it into its own little protective force field and make it easy to move around. With our eye selected, I will go get the move tool, and if you hover over the side of it, you get these red plus marks that'll help you sort of stand it up really easy. With it stood up, I'm going to select right on the bottom here and zoom out and then zoom into our tower. And if your tower is circular, you can kind of move around the edge and it'll help you snap the eye right in the center like this. So I'll click to set it down, click on it again, and move it up a little bit because I want my eye hovering above the tower like this. Now let's start adding some color to our model. So I'm going to hit the paint bucket tool, and I'm going to go over here and select this red color and paint the eye. Now you'll see what happens here. With one click, it painted the entire eye. And the reason that happened was I was not double-clicked and inside the group like this. And so when you're double-clicked and you're inside a group, you'll see that everything else is kind of grayed out. And you've seen me do this as we've modeled along here. And this is important when you're making edits to a group, or in this case, when you are putting textures on. So let's add some textures to this eye. So I'm going to scroll through the texture list here and find some interesting colors to put on. So let's start with this orange color here. This is just a solid color we're applying. And this looks pretty good, but I think I want it a little more textured. I don't want just flat colors. So if you look through, there isn't really like an orange, lava, or fire color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this boring asphalt texture, and I'm going to paint it on here, but we're going to tweak it so it looks like fire and lava. So I'm going to hit the home button here in our materials, and I'm going to find that asphalt texture in our library. When you hit that home button, this is going to show you all the textures that are currently in your model. So if I click on that asphalt texture and then click on the pencil tool, it's going to bring up this edit window. And I can click on the colorize button, and I can actually colorize this to make it look like more orange and fire and lava. And it'll retain the original textures. So you can see this is looking a lot more realistic and fun. So when you're done, click done, and you've got an edited texture. Let's do a couple more textures. So let's say I want to make this tower look like some dark brick. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to take this concrete scored jointless texture, and I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to go back to home, and I'm going to click on this concrete texture and click the pencil tool. I'm going to make some edits. First, I'm going to do what we just did. I'm going to colorize it, make it look nice and dark. But what I really want is this texture to be a little more chunky looking. So you can actually change the scale of a texture. So if you go up to width and height, I'm going to put a larger number in here, and you'll see what happens. As I increase this number to be larger and larger, you can see the texture on the tower becomes larger and larger. So those vertical lines become more apparent. Now let's say you want to copy a custom texture or just another texture you've used in your model. You can do that with the paint bucket tool. If you hold down Option or Alt and you click on an existing texture, it'll sample that texture and allow you to paint it onto another object. So it's essentially like a copy for textures. I'll finish up this tower by going into the top here and just adding that texture onto the top. And I can select it from my library here if I choose and put it on. So our tower is looking pretty good, but we still need to address the rocky mountain below. And to do that, I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to find a different texture. So what's neat about these textures that come with SketchUp is that you can use them as they are, or you can tweak them to what you like. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to find something that looks like some stones or gravel or something that's, probably unpleasant to climb up. So go in here and landscaping, fencing, and vegetation, and here's some nice stones in here. So I'm going to click this one and paint it on our mountain. I'm not happy with the size of the stones or the color, so I'm going to click on the home button again and then click on the stones and click the pencil tool at the top. And first I'm going to go make the stones a little larger. So I'm going to put in a larger number in here, get these stones looking a little bigger. And then again, I'll go over to colorize, and since everything in Mordor seems to be very dark and gray and black, I'm going to colorize these stones to be a lot darker and click done. So we've got a pretty good looking tower and mountain going on here. As I'm looking at this though, I'm realizing that my mountain isn't quite big enough for my liking. So I'm going to select it and click the scale tool. And you can actually scale something like this very easily. So I'm just going to take my mountain and stretch it this way and stretch it that way, pull it forward a little bit and pull it back, and very easily I can make my mountain a lot bigger. So I feel a lot better about that. Now, as you remember from the original model I showed you at the beginning of this video, we had a really cool backdrop of these dark clouds and skies. Now, while we could probably model a sky, there's actually a much easier way to create one. So I'm going to just go into Google Images and I'm going to search for scary dark sky, and I'm going to find an image that I like, and I'm going to get it on the screen as big as I possibly can, and then I'm just going to take a screenshot of it and save it on my computer. The way you take a screenshot will vary based on the device that you're on, but all you have to do is save the image file on the computer. So now I'm going to go find the rotated rectangle tool. And so this is a rectangle tool like what we used in the beginning, but it lets you make a rectangle that stands up like this. So you basically click to start the rectangle, click the other side, and then click a third direction, which is the direction you want it to stand up. And I'm going to create a rectangle like this. And now we're going to take that dark sky image and actually use it as a texture that we can paint on this rectangle we just made. And to do that, go over to the hamburger file menu on the side and click Insert. That's going to bring up this dialog box, and you can select the image from your computer. So I'm going to go find that image that I saved previously and click Open. Let's check it out to make sure I got the right one here. And when you click Open, you're going to want to make sure you click Material when you bring it in. And so when you do this, it's going to put the material on the paint bucket tool already. So you can click in the bottom left-hand corner of your backdrop and then click on the right so it stretches all the way. And now you've got this scary dark sky as a backdrop to your model. So a heck of a lot easier than modeling your own clouds. So now you can move around and get just the right view so you capture that background and a nice menacing view of your dark Tower of Mordor in the Eye of Sauron. If you want to save that view, you can use the scenes method that we learned in the beginning of this video. But congratulations, you learned some advanced modeling techniques. You learned about components, you learned about bending and stretching geometry, and bringing in images to make cool backgrounds. So happy modeling, and we'd love to see what you create.